This production is brought to you by the Sacramento History Foundation and is made possible by these generous donors: the Wiley W. Manuel Bar Association, Runyon, Saltzman, and Einhorn, the Sacramento Region Community Foundation, Mr. Dan Visnich, and Pastor Jason Sample.
You will hear testimony from the gentleman that I have a great deal of admiration for in the next few days. The gentleman is from Sacramento. His name is Nathaniel Colley. Nathaniel Colley is a black lawyer. He was former general counsel of the NAACP. He was born in Alabama, came to Sacramento, opened up his law practice, and became truly one of the prominent lawyers in the United States.
I was born in rural Alabama, and I represent, I think, something special in America, and that is you can come from anywhere and go anywhere if you really try. And I came from rural Alabama, where I was unfit for picking cotton from the very outset.
First, we're going to have to lay the facts on the line about the existence of discrimination in housing. And the Supreme Court said that a state must use all of its resources in every reasonable manner to achieve desegregation.
How long do you expect this legal battle to take?
Well, I don't know, but as I think that some general said, once we're prepared to fight on this line all winter, but we're prepared to fight on this line for many years if it takes that.
Nathaniel Colley stood tall with the giants of the American Civil Rights Movement. During a 43-year law career that spanned 7 California governors and 9 U.S. presidents, he played a vital role in ending the discriminatory practices of many institutions. His life's work transformed the city of Sacramento, changed the state of California, and impacted the country as a whole.
You know, he integrated the police department, he integrated the fire department, he made it easier for teachers to get jobs right here.
Legally, he opened the doors and threw down a lot of the discriminatory practices that were present.
So when you think about the second half of the century in Sacramento, I can't imagine anybody having a greater footprint on our community than Mr. Colley.
Nathaniel Colley's life began nearly a century ago in the segregated South. He was born 20 miles outside of Selma, Alabama, the youngest of 6 children, raised in substandard housing by a widowed mother who recognized his unique talents early on and encouraged him to read books.
And she wanted Dad to be educated because he wasn't fit for, like he said, working in the field. He was very thin and he was sickly.
After graduating high school from nearby Snow Hill Institute, Nat Colley attended the Tuskegee Institute, where he met a young co-ed from California named Jerlean Jackson, who would soon become his wife, and later convinced Nathaniel that her hometown of Sacramento would be a good place to live and work. As a student, he studied chemistry and was mentored by the famed scientist George Washington Carver. After graduating first in his class of 1941, Nathaniel Colley set out to become a chemist, but his experience in World War II changed the course of his life.
You will never know how much trouble it gave me to lead a black company in the Solomon Islands and in the Philippine Islands and in New Guinea, and people would ask me, why are all the people in your company black? And I also recognized the segregations and the evils of it. And I determined at that time that something had to be done about this. And so I made the bold move of deciding to go to law school.
Captain Nathaniel Colley returned to his home state after the war. He wanted to enter law school at the University of Alabama, but was turned away because he was black. another door soon opened, this one in the Ivy League. And 2 years later, as the only African-American student in his class, Nathaniel Sextus Colley graduated from Yale Law School with honors. He and Jerlean then headed west to build their life together in California's capital city.
Hello? Won't you join us for a trip depicting life in Sacramento, 1950?
At that time, there was no black professional class to speak of, no large numbers of doctors, if any, lawyers, clerical workers. Most African Americans at that time worked in menial jobs. So these were the conditions, basically, that Nathaniel Colley, upon his arrival in Sacramento, found still in effect.
With the backing of the local chapter of the NAACP, Sacramento's only black attorney moved quickly, using the courtroom as a tool to break down the inherent segregation and restrictive covenants that existed throughout Sacramento and across California. The Colley family itself showed remarkable courage during their early years in Sacramento. They even integrated their own neighborhood.
When they integrated Southland Park in 1955, that was a very difficult time for the family because we faced a lot of opposition, going to school and just residing in the neighborhood. We had boxes burned on front of the house, epithets yelled at the house and at us, and it was a difficult time.
So now, of course, the theory behind fair housing is that nobody is to be discriminated against. All fair housing does is try to make housing available to all people on an economic basis without regard to race, color, or creed. It seems to me this is fundamental in the American system, but somehow we have not been able to sell that idea to people.
The decade-long struggle to end discrimination in housing included many landmark lawsuits initiated by Nathaniel Colley. One of them, Ming versus Horgan, involved a group of Sacramento realtors who were engaging in racial restrictions while at the same time receiving federal money. Colley won the suit, successfully arguing the first housing case in American history that said the mere receipt of federal funds made it illegal to discriminate.
It was more important in many ways than any discrimination, say at a lunch counter or at a water fountain, as was the case in the South, because housing is a basic fundamental access into the economic power that most Americans require to be successful in this country.
Fighting for equal access in education was also fundamental to Nathaniel Colley. In 1960, California Governor Pat Brown appointed him to the State Board of Education, the first African American to be so named. There, Colley got textbooks changed, insisting that the accomplishments of blacks be properly reflected. And in the courtroom, he successfully fought for the integration of California's public schools.
Because the State Department of Education issued statistics, which are current statistics, showing that there are still literally hundreds, if not thousands, of racially imbalanced schools in the state of California. That's as of 1971. So if this is the case, then we feel that the State Board of Education ought to exercise its statutory and constitutional powers and come forward with a broad desegregation plan for the whole state of California.
As Colley's stature grew, so did his profile beyond Sacramento. He was a national director of the NAACP for over 30 years.
Knowing politicians, knowing school boards and legislatures, I think you're going to find that individuals like myself and organizations like the NAACP are going to have to try to keep us on the constitutional path. I'm amused by all the people who talk about law and order, but every time they get a chance, they try to sneak in something to prevent law and order.
Colley served on statewide and national commissions as well. In 1976, Governor Jerry Brown appointed him chair of the California Horse Racing Board. Colley also represented the U.S. at conferences and summits around the world, and he was special advisor to several presidents, most notably John F. Kennedy, with whom he had formed a friendship.
He was on a plane when President Kennedy was assassinated, and that was very difficult for him because he had formed such a bond with him, and he was able to, President Kennedy would listen and they could set an agenda for what they wanted to do.
Colley's reputation as a champion of civil rights was now widely known by those in high office. But he tended to downplay his achievements back home, often referring to himself as just a country lawyer from Sacramento.
But he was one of those people who could speak two languages. You know, he could speak and hang and break bread with the community, and then he can go dine with presidents of the United States and speak the language there. So I think for all of us, he was bilingual in his own way.
When he went back to the NAACP to give a talk at the U.S. Capitol.
Longtime friend and colleague Dan Visnich marveled at Colley's gift for language. The two worked together on initiatives and legislation over the years, and Visnich saw firsthand Nathaniel's ability to perfectly choose his words.
He would get a pen and legal ruling paper and write something. Once in a while, I noticed he would scratch out one word or two. Now, when most people write, they're editing and re-editing. He didn't. He apparently wrote just the way he talked. And he had a wonderful vocabulary to use the right words.
We march for Mr. and Mrs. Harry T. Moore, who paid for freedom in the coin of life. We march for Reverend George Lee, who died because he dared to exercise his right as American citizen. We march for Medgar Evers, who made the supreme sacrifice to cleanse his land from bigotry and discrimination.
The classroom was another setting perfectly suited for Colley's talents. He taught judicial philosophy at the McGeorge School of Law for nearly 2 decades. In 1987, one of his colleagues at McGeorge, Anthony Kennedy, turned to his fellow Sacramentan when President Ronald Reagan nominated Judge Kennedy to the United States Supreme Court.
Mr. Colley, it's a distinct pleasure to have you here, and quite frankly, somewhat reassuring. You have been, if I'm not mistaken, president of or national bar. You have been a man of been deeply involved in civil rights issues all your life, and I'm anxious to hear what you have to say about this gentleman.
Thank you very much, Senator Biden. It's a pleasure for me to be here also, and I can assure you that I would not be here if I didn't have reasonable cause to believe that Judge Kennedy will be an outstanding member of the Supreme Court of the United States.
Colley's endorsement carried great sway, especially among Democrats.
A most fitting description of Judge Kennedy came from Mr. Nathaniel S. Colley, Sr., who described Judge Kennedy as a grown man, but also a growing man.
Anthony Kennedy became just the 5th nominee in U.S. history to be unanimously confirmed to the Supreme Court. The new justice later wrote to his old friend, "Dear Nat, you are more than one of the great attorneys in the history of our bar. You are one of the most gifted of teachers. It has been my honor to know you and to have you as my teacher and friend."
They were peers. They were peers, and they respected each other very much. And the law is really what brought them together.
Early in 1991, Colley was diagnosed with brain cancer. And while he continued to work during his illness, the disease took his life on May 20th, 1992. His passing was noted across the country.
He was a modest man, so to have lived a good life, and he always talked about good works. That was very important to him.
In the years since his death, the far-reaching impact of Nathaniel Colley's life's work has carried on.
I think without a shadow of a doubt, and I don't think anyone would deny, that he paved the way for Sacramento to be the most diverse city in America.
In 2002, the Civil Rights Project at Harvard University identified Nat Colley's adopted hometown as the most integrated and diverse city in the United States.
Here's his handwritten notes, which he then later had typed up.
And in 2012, the documents from an extraordinary life are now a permanent part of the city's history. The papers of Nathaniel and Jerlean Colley have been donated by their family to the Center for Sacramento History.
Here we have a Sacramentan who's made an impact nationwide, and so for us to have a collection like this is a great honor and privilege to be able to share that with researchers.
The web exhibit is kind of like a virtual finding aid for the collection, meaning it's sort of like a table of contents. So if people can't or don't feel like coming down here for a formal research appointment, they can sort of access this collection, the story of Nathaniel Colley's life and career, the story of his family, from their own home.
I'm very thankful for the city for believing the center would be the best place to be a depository for all of his works, his collections, his memorabilia. That elevates, I think, Sacramento's ability to just recognize and appreciate one of his very own.
Those of us who believe in the system are just going to try to make the system work. And if it won't work, then of course no one can say we didn't try to make it work.